The first time I played through Dark Lord and the Maiden of Light, I came away from it thinking, what an interesting experience. I had a mind to try to put down my thoughts into a little something like this, but couldn't really get started. More or less, I thought it was interesting how closely it followed FE7's core plot points, while also doing new and interesting things with them. The unique pace it sets and the fact that the story is told well enough that it almost faked me out. A lot is left up to player interpretation. That's good, like who the eponymous Dark Lord and Maiden of Light truly are, and what their relation is. The gameplay also has some great new ideas executed very well, less in the vein of class changes and more in dynamic and unique maps. I think the best bet would be to go through chapter by chapter and examine them all in detail. So, I've seen DLATMOL described as Vanilla Plus, right down to the default character customization screen. Now, I do like it when something as mundane as the calendar has some attention to it, like in Tacthack, Knight of Lotus or Three Houses. No luck here. Not a big deal, but I am now obligated to refer to FE7 and DLATMOL at least once as Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. The footage is from only my second playthrough. The only thing of note on the last one is not using Francine, something I'm trying to change, and Ronaldo not breaking bloody double-digit strength. I also don't know unit growths, and I have no concrete idea of who's good and who isn't. Unlike Tacthack, where I had an army of units with well-defined roles, I feel like DLATMOL gives you an army of shitters. At least, no one immediately comes to mind as excellent. In a way that's good, because when I discuss units given in a chapter, I'll hopefully be much more objective and more open to being impressed. Now, what makes a good map? This is a more difficult question to answer than what makes a good unit. A case study might be in order. One of my favourite maps is Blood Runs Red. First time I played through Path of Radiance, I knew what I was in for, but it still took me 5 attempts to clear it fully. The map has just about everything. Good choke points, timed side objectives, a very unique surprise. Your units aren't quite hitting their stride, and between full Canto and mixed attackers, breaking through the choke point and getting all the objectives can be tough. You do have adequate tools for the job. For one, Titania exists. You should have a good stock of bonus experience, a stat booster or two, Leaf, Marsha, and more deployment slots than usual. You're given a clear objective, some forewarning about Jill and the surprise, and barring a catastrophe, plenty of time to get onto the boat, which isn't seized, so anyone can do it and end the map. So basically, a good map should offer challenges you can overcome with the tools you have presently. Ideally, it does so in an interesting way, which happens quite often in DLATMOL. Blood Runs Red is a somewhat complex mid-game chapter. It can't be judged the same as a late to end-game chapter or an early chapter. Hopefully I can explain in a bit more detail as we go, and no other place to start than the prologue. So the prologue starts with a self-insert, who's a dark mage, Natch, heading up to the dukedom of YuriThra, where they meet Hector, Orion. The tactician is on a journey to better their tactical genius and step out of their father's shadow. Very quickly, Camille, Tacthack's tactician, noticeably stuck to the strategies of Ulysses, their father, who was a big brain strategist as well. Anyway, shenanigans ensue, bandits raid, the castle mounts a counter-offensive. An immediate observation is how the hack doesn't really launch you into a new world with new faces or ideas. Hector is right there. And there's Titania. No fancy level 10 Jaegans here, standard paladin. I'm not complaining, if you're going to copy a Jaegan, copy Titania. The other thing was seeing Heck with 2 swords and immediately judging this hack as dumber than the last promise. As edgy as Kellic was, I never saw him bust out the dual wielding. I think the big bad snoo lady you meet later on calls him out as just wanting to look cool, and I've heard there is a lore reason he uses 2 swords. That doesn't make it less stupid. All that is nitpicking, the animation work is nice and the sound is weighty. Now initially I had a joke here about Shez and their dual wielding and another case of stolen ideas, because initially I wanted this video out before Hope's released. Now that's a joke, and I really don't want to discuss Hope's. The prologue is nothing to stand out. Francine is designed very well in that she's slow but strong, so she can still feed kills. Though for the prologue, that steel axe will kill the bandits and she can double the merc. I'm not certain why Shermie is a dunderhead, but I have seen her succumb to the Myrmidon curse despite being a mercenary. One of the recipients of buffs, guessing growths because her bases look the same. Good stuff all around. Chapter 1 immediately starts with something interesting. Did you notice it? Where's the boss? We also get Eli and Emma. Now, I didn't use Eli because I remain unconvinced the GBA archers will ever be good outside of Tacthack, and Emma struggled for mediocrity last run. Something ridiculous like 11 strength at 21, and not even with a good enough speed stat or bulk to make up for it. I only think she had going was 2 weapons and move. I've heard she's a coin flip unit, and in fact actually has stats exactly like Eli would. Anyway, nothing too strenuous here. The mage up the top is very squishy and can be dispatched at your leisure. You do want to make your way up to the top village so you can get your first healer. I did end up benching Arthur on my last playthrough, but only after promotion and a dearth of other staff units came along that were just flat out better. Still, his service was appreciated. Francine can engage the cav reinforcements without risk of killing or taking any damage, funneling experience to your shitters. Simple, quick, easy, not bad. Chapter 2 gives us our first base screen. This is something you want to do rather early, especially if it comes with a convoy. If you're going to go out of your way to deny convoy access like the last promise, I think a warning would at least be nice. Orion gets his rapier, and Blair, fittingly, spawns on a fort. You've got a village to secure, a gate to defend, plenty of forts to heal up, and 9 turns to hold out or go up and kill the boss. You also get Hyle, a fighter, an extra body, a red gem, well suited to a debut of doing enough. Now, don't discount those cav reinforcements who bust down the snag and breach through. Eli can't bait out the advanced nomad because archers are shit, and I only avoided a reset because I got very lucky. Use Blair to soak up hits as intended. Think ahead, and this chapter shouldn't offer much difficulty. Second run through I was waylaid by a turn somewhere and Francine didn't manage to off the boss and steal his book. A very standard early game defense chapter like Mercenary Fort Defense in Path of Radiance. Jumping straight into a sewer chapter, huh? Now, would you believe on my first playthrough this is where I saw Ronnie get a strength level up and thought, oh sweet, a thief that isn't garbage. I wouldn't say Ronnie is a garbage unit, but never have I had a more noodle-armed unit. Listen here, you rat-faced, cheese-smelling, onion-eating prick, fool me once, etc. In this chapter, plenty of enemies are using poison weapons, but we do have a restore staff and antitoxins. Well, obviously this map and the hack as a whole maybe wants to teach us to use our resources as we need them. This is a good thing, except Restore specifically is a bad example to me. Suffice to say, I found Restore in scarce supply on my last playthrough. We also see the 2 different types of armour knights, bow, sword and lance axe, with generals promoting to have all weapons, blessed be. The javelin knights at the start can't be baited, which is aggravating, especially because the only 1 to 2 range we have right now, and for most of the game, is the tactician. Now, I would not recommend deliberately baiting out the boss, as he is an active pain in the ass. Again, I got a super lucky dodge and reminder to use the resources given. A hit and the damage over time would have killed Eli. There's a bit of nothing time after you've cleared the map and are just waiting to loot the chests and escort Orion to the arrive point. In my opinion, this is a slightly poorly paced chapter, but it's a minor complaint. Early game map simplicity will make something small like that stick out though. Just quickly, I don't like telling other people how to play their Fire Emblems. Yeah, I know, but here, very briefly, I want to give one piece of advice for DLATMOL early game. Take it seriously. Just because Francine is invincible doesn't mean anyone else is. And yes, just because it's easy doesn't mean it isn't dangerous. Onto chapter 4, and we meet two new characters, Aislinn and Yet. Now there have been some odd names in Effie and ROM hacks for sure, but Yet to me is a standout strange one. It's like calling a character as or if. Anyway, the map looks pretty standard. Don't get caught out like a goober by that Sword Reaver or the boss's poleaxe. Francine isn't 100% the answer to this particular problem. We also meet Horton, who may or may not be looking to hear a who at the end of turn 1. Don't worry, that village is safe. Horton is capable of defending it, mostly. And bam, look, a fourth recruit, Fianna. Orion says it best in his all-knowing of Fire Emblem strategy way. In terms of the map itself, it's another slow one. All of these forests at the start make traversal a pain, and guess what, that flyer comes in handy, but not in the way you might think. What do you think happens when a Sword Reaver attacks a Myrmidon? The triangle reverses, and the Axe Magnet curse triples. However, a lance against a Sword Reaver, you've got a winning formula. I don't think you actually have to talk to Yet to recruit her, but like Sephiroth, I've got a compulsion to do everything on this chapter. I feel like this chapter was deliberately designed to be slow, rather than just having early game sluggishness. Have fun with the end of map reinforcements because you definitely need to kill the boss before par time to avoid them. Chapter 5 starts with something very unfamiliar to me, snow. The gimmick of this chapter is not quite intermittent weather, but intermittent fog of war. The latter is, as far as I'm aware, unique and a simple and effective twist. This map was very up and down for me. On one hand you have the Tactician with about a 60% hit rate. On the other you have Fianna and Emma getting some decent levels and overall having a pretty decent handle on the map. Now, the lack of 2 range against the enemies on terrain your footsloggers can't reach is a bit of a pain, but it's nothing you can't handle. By no means would I call this a difficult chapter, and it actually can have a decent flow despite the stop-start of Fog of War. If I were a betting man, and despite Fire Emblem just being dice rolls, I sure am not, my guess is that the intermittent fog is actually to stop Ronnie and his torch bullshit. About halfway through the chapter we meet Dimsdale Dimmadome. Dale Murderhawk, and he's proper cross about some guy trampling his garden. Then he can be recruited. He does come with a hand axe. Now DLATMOL has a tendency to remove reliable 1-2 range, and guess what? That hand axe is not reliable. Even so, his kit is pretty nice, bringing some wah, a steel, and if you get to him in a timely fashion, a killer axe barely out of your way. Solid chapter, possibly the exiting point of early game, for the better. We start setting up some story stuff in chapter 6. We first meet Maxibon, get introduced to a monster, and notice that half the chapter isn't bloody visible. Maxi doesn't seem like he has the stats to be troublesome, and neither do any of his forces. He has a good formation, but it's pretty easily breached. He does the pretty standard Effie villain thing of getting beat and then warping away, but given everything I know about Dark Dude and the Light Lady, I'll let it slide. Tacthack did it too, a bit more egregiously I reckon. We open up the other half of the map, or more like 2/3, and it's a good thing XCOM taught me how to stack up and door breach, because that's the best bet. We get some priest reinforcements, see some chests to escort Ronnie to, and begin our assault into the fort proper, which goes pretty swimmingly. The actual mage boss is even more of a pushover than Max, and the Armor Knight and mage formation pretty much crumples before you. Along with some well-spaced chests that you're perfectly supplied for, all in all, this is a good chapter. One more thing, this chapter has a Gaiden requirement. The stationary monks in the bottom right and top right must survive for you to get to 6x. This isn't something you need to worry about, just clear in a timely fashion. Chapter 6 is, annoyingly, another fog chapter. If I were to ever make a ROM hack, I simply wouldn't bother including a fog chapter because there's nothing well designed about it. I will continue to complain about Fog of War because it will forever be a failure on the part of IS. It is inexcusable for an enemy unit to come out of fog with no prior line of sight and just swing at your dudes. On the chapter itself, in Fire Emblem I find it's typically not actually a bad idea to split the party. You need all that lovely experience after all. This carries similar risks to moving as one big blob. Assuming enemies on the flank you don't take pursue, you're asking to be pincered. Immediately, a plan of action came to mind. Ronnie goes one way, and a torch staff goes the other. Doing so will mitigate Fog of War, but I still despise it. Apart from the fog, this chapter is pretty tame. Yes, the constant eclipse spam is irritating, but the only time I got hit was on the 145% against Aislinn, who was nowhere near the front line. Typical hit rates for Eclipse are no higher than 25% and are often single digit, so no real worries here. The other annoying thing here is diminishing vision with torches. At one point I wanted to check the weapon of an axe dude but couldn't because he was one tile out of fog. He happened to have a sword reaver and chunked Emma who had a sword because I was in range of an axe dude. Said axe dude also had no prior line of sight to my units and shouldn't have been able to do that, but we all know I'm not going to stop crapping on about it. Hit the 4 special tiles and the centre opens up. This also isn't too bad, the enemies are far out of range of the little rooms. What is bad is that fucking nomad coming 9 tiles out of fog and shooting someone. What's your recourse there? There's no reason to go up to the top or torch it up, it's just a big fuck you. Closing in on the main objective, in the centre some of the Myrmidons do have sword readers, but with torch vision you can check and adjust accordingly. All the shamans in the very centre have loot to grab and depending on if they've burnt through their eclipse uses are more or less free kills. The monsters can be a problem. Francine with a steel can kill one and you can easily tag team to kill the other. Chandra herself is actually a slight problem. Nosferatu is dangerous. I didn't end up having a problem, but you do have to engage carefully. You also have to have Orion fight her if you want to recruit her. Good to see the old meme of Hector being a wife beater made it into Dak Jack and laugh at his sack. As a quick note on Chandra, I still believe redundancy is bad for a unit. However, everybody likes dark mages and Chandra is a good support for Orion, so she's got an advantage or two. Points deducted for Fog of War, but Fog is IS's fault, not the ROM hackers. You can't do your job right if you've not got working tools. Chapter 7 is a bit of a nothing chapter, just a perfectly adequate map, nothing stand out. Opening options are simple and effective, the path forward is straight and the only real surprise might be getting caught off guard by a longbow. Our objective, beyond seas, is to rescue Ren and Ashley, a lance, bow, armour and Pegasus Knight respectively. Now, Ashley has a reputation as being one of the best units in the game, and sure, I used her on my last playthrough, but I don't recall her being so obviously the best, and honestly Fianna seems very comparable, even if Fianna has almost definitely been on the roids. This leads to a conundrum. With me already running low on deployment slots, can I justify using 2 Pegasus Knights? Yes, by dumping Arthur. I also hear he's good, but I've never seen it. Just by virtue of all the tiles and chokes you have to cross, this is a bit of a long chapter, but I wouldn't call it slow paced. Early game is well and truly gone, and multiple options are now available to you, so gameplay can be a bit more open. I was originally going to talk about some story stuff here, but if you want to see the story stuff, play the game yourself. Suffice to say, there's a 10-minute intro that sort of comes out of left field. I do want to talk about one specific character, but we'll need full game context for that. However, gameplay. Tacthack made archers good by giving them good stats and roughly doubling experience gain. Dank Damo and Bright Lezo makes them good by making them the answer to thorny problems. With both having bow armors, Ren might be a good shout to add to your team. I wouldn't, and didn't, and now I'm thinking the next step in ROM hacking is elevating armor knights. Even giving them 5 move would be a decent start. I digress, let's move on. With a mercifully short intro compared to the last one, we march to Volta in Chapter 8, the doorstep to Urntere's capital proper. The planned convergence of the 3 armies isn't happening, and Good King Orion's cousin Raymond, is to be executed because Dracul is a dick. Luckily, some guy is there to engage an enemy at one range with a bow and flee. I happen to like Bocab, so I ended up adding Luca to my team last playthrough, and he very quickly capped strength and became a standout unit. When it came to the final boss, he couldn't do anything, but that's getting very ahead of ourselves. As for Raymond, typically he filled a slot. With Emma being a Myrmidon on a horse, Raymond stood out as an actual cav with well-rounded stats. Sort of a reverse Negu Gerwolf Tacthack duo. With Emma turning out incredibly well, I doubt there'll be a place for Raymond and his special eyes. This chapter has a unique objective. Any of your units are to claim the 2 points outside of the city so that the city, and I quote, opens the gate to defend themselves. Barely makes a lick of sense to me, but I guess the city is worried about siege operations and thinks they can fight better outside of the city. Or something like that. We'll ignore it and move on, nothing's perfect. There's also a house at the top of the map, best nabbed by Francine and her 9 move, and it gives you James. Axe dudes in this hack are pretty great. One's a gardener and this one's a fisherman. James isn't the final word in Axe Infantry, you've still got some deciding to do. Fun times are ahead as you push through the chapter. Hand axes, poison axes, and most fun of all, cav effective weaponry. Do not be stupid and try to go cav vs cav. As you approach the fort on the right, mages will spring out of the fort, but not to worry, you're not exactly facing mixed attackers because the soldiers standing guard don't move. After you secure both tiles, the enemies will combine the Clown Car strat with the Port Warren strat, neither executed to their fullest capacity, though you will get a nice surprise when the Armor Knights standing guard decide to move, or if you forget about that ballista and park a flyer within range. This was a fun one, plenty of chokes to fight through and seize, and I felt I had enough options to tackle anything that came my way. The maps have been getting better and better at a steady pace, and I'm all for it. Dracul folds before some chip damage and 3 times effective armor slaying, goes on about how there is no victory against Demos and carks it. Jasmine is next and we're in for a fight. Chapter 9 has the first little everyone says words of encouragement before the climactic battle, wherein we get the best line in the game. You go, James May, you follow your dreams. Despite being a big battle and our cast having swelled, we're still restricted to 12 deployment slots. And with chests to loot, Ronnie becomes mandatory to me, so I feel even further limited. We get reintroduced to the tile switches from 6X as the means of progressing through the map, which looks like a doozy as a whole. With winding long corridors defended by siege weapons, mixed range enemies, and slightly unpredictable openings as you hit the switches, topping off with a boss fight against a legendary 1-2 range weapon. Yeah, this is the end of part 1 alright. With my choice to dump Arthur, splitting the party with one healer means everyone has to be loaded up with vulneraries. My tactics for this map are sending the strongest units with the healer and the more well-rounded and numerous without. Oh, and the flyer isn't going anywhere near the ballista. Now, you could argue that many of the enemy being stationary is a pace killer, but in this case I'd spin it as being able to move at your pace, which if you listen to Orion should be a quick one. Of course, you have to balance haste with caution, as there's no way to know that the enemies are stationary until you find out yourself or listen to me. As the map closes, a minor utilisation of clown car strats has you facing a half dozen mixed-ranged mixed attackers, or rather defenders. Those dark mages are tricky. Luna and Nosferatu are nasty surprises. Blitz the bastards. Then prepare to square up against the biggest fop ever to grace ROM-hacks. For his stats not being all that impressive, Jasmine sure does put up a bit of a fight. Even cav-effective weapons are only reliable on the damage front, not the hit rate front. Still, with a bit of luck, a few of your units should be able to survive a hit. Despite Durga bearing down on you, you should have plenty of time to beat Jasmine and seize the throne. If Blair is alive, which is almost guaranteed given the unfortunate tendency for Armor to defend the bench more than anything else, you'll head to 9X in search of Urntere's legendary weapon Selenius. Meanwhile, Voland returns to Vanheim for Nova Caliber, and Florence will return to Florencia for Goldbrand. The gang arrives at the shrine and detects the presence of magic voodoo bullshit. With the help of Flatty Witch McGee, you dispel the bad guy's magic and then prepare to fight. Now I do wonder if 6X hasn't been done or it goes pear-shaped and you just kill Chandra, what happens? This chapter cuts your deployment slots down from 12 to 9, and given that there's chests, it's more like 8 because you'll need Ronnie. Not much to complain about here, you have enough time to stop the thief if you use Francine and some 2-range weapons, even with some bad dice rolls. The enemy thief has to open a door and a chest and then flee. With many good rolls in myriad aspects so far in the run, I opted to take the most expedient option available to me. Alternatively, because you're probably sending Ronnie up there anyway, he should be fast enough to steal from the thief. The Eclipse Mage in the bottom can be taken out at your leisure, and you do want to take him out because he has a free Nosferatu. Speaking of Nosferatu, the boss has one as well, but he's otherwise a pushover. A quick, simple map, no you don't need to bring Blair, no there's nothing in the open chest. Moving on. Maximus is doing his thing, being evil and shit, mastering necromancy, killing plain savages, and heading up to the Tomb of Worms. Wonder what they got in there. Meanwhile, Orion moves into Deimos and gets ambushed by the titular Minos gang, who you might remember from Chapter 4. They're even more orc-like than the Braxians from Tacthack, and I'll absolutely be making the same comparison. So War Boss Molguts, that's a stretch, is holed up somewhere in his fort, and in the style of the Tiki chapter from FE1 and 3, we can't see where until we open up the doors. We've gone from 9 to 10 for deployment, still bloody well not enough, but we'll deal. Just because we get a free dancer doesn't mean you can short me, you bastard game. Same for the dude who Kool-Aid mans through his cell somehow. Huh, deja vu. You'll also want to talk to Whitney on her way out. It won't pay off immediately, but rather a little later on. The centre area won't open until all of the green units have escaped, so there's a few turns of just waiting around. There are some reinforcements to keep you on your toes, and they all have a door key that you can only steal for some reason. Once the green units escape, you have yet another dangerous boss to face. The boss only has axes though, so bring an axe reaver. After Moloch is defeated, Florence shows up with the gold brand and tells us to go meet a very trustworthy chap by the name of Alva. Well, nothing can go wrong there, so why not? Before we move on, I know some of these maps seem pretty standard, well made overall, but nothing that would wow anyone. I distinctly remember being very impressed with several maps in Dark Do You Get the Joke Yet Dal, but after the death of Jasmine, the game is going to take a little bit of time to build up some momentum. For the moment, we're going to wait the game out, and let it improve at its own pace, not that we have a choice. By all accounts, Chapter 11 starts off quite well. We make it to the fortress Alva is holed up in, and there seems to be an acceptable amount of treachery hanging around Alva like a bad smell. However, some actual treachery takes place when a bloke named Thomas, who is also invited to the fortress, decides he wants to try to kill all of us. Before he starts, he warns Darius, not that one, to not go philandering, which he then immediately sets out to do, because fuck that guy. This time our party starts split rather than being deployed together and being made to split up for the map. A meaningless distinction if you ask me. We also rocket up to 13 deployment slots. That took long enough. And we get even more units as Mid-Day? Marissa can be recruited. Alva can be recruited too, but for this chapter he has parked himself firmly on the throne. The objective is to defend for 13 turns. Moreover, we have 13 turns to steal everything that isn't nailed down, and take the desperately needed speed wings from Thomas. As you start the chapter, Alva has a special present for the tactician, a rapier equivalent for dark magic called Implode. That's awesome. Thanny bombs, but better. It's a little plain compared to Tacthack's 2 to 3 range seer tome, and it does only use Flux's animations, but otherwise, no complaints. Florence won't actually lend a hand, and after a few turns he'll just flat out piss off. Like most others, this defend chapter can also be a defeat boss chapter if you're stretched thin. A few decisive hits against the boss can do you a world of good. After a few turns there will be some steady reinforcements, and I found that was somewhat easy to adapt to. The top left wyverns and bowcav can be pretty easily dealt with by an average Francine, with the option of supporting her with a bow in the chest area or Darius as he brings up the rear. The south of the map with Thomas can be a bit trickier. Cavs with both weapons, a bowcav and a Pegasus Knight at the same time may give you cause to retreat for a turn, then push back once you're reinforced. Or rather, you reinforce yourself because Florence isn't coming back. Thomas on his own isn't a threat, he just has a strong tome and enough stats to not be doubled. After dealing with this chapter and looting all the chests, we take inventory and find we have quite a handful of promotion items. At this point, the highest level unit I have is the Tactician at level 15. He's been getting fed quite a bit of experience because his growths have been shit. Orion is in a similar boat, but to a lesser extent. I think by this point last playthrough he had capped strength, but he definitely had less stats everywhere else. Depending on the circumstances, I'm still likely to wait until 20 before promotion. By this point my team should be starting to settle itself. That's not quite the case here. Darius vs Shermie is an interesting conundrum. Darius can recruit a lot of units, but I'll stick with what I know. The maps are getting more interesting, as is party composition choice, and the latter does not typically happen. Chapter 12 has another info dump. We meet two leading generals of Demos, Khan and Jenna. The latter intends to meet us in battle along with two dark sect voodoo bullshit spook boogeymen. Alva recites a brief history of Demos over the last 13 years. Raum is regent but not king. Prince Arjun isn't related and has yet to come of age. Onto the map, it's more monsters, as well as some normal enemies and some villages to get to. I'm going to try to refrain from making obvious jokes, but I will say Bane's con is one higher than Sanchez's, making Bane a big guy. As we start the map, I'm torn because we get an extra deployment slot, and with no chests we can even make use of it, but there just seems to be too many units I want to use. I've heard great things about Darius and Alva. Darius is only slightly worse than Shermie, and I've heard Alva is a very well-rounded unit and a shoo-in for the use of Nova Caliber after he gets trained. I've said before that I haven't used S-rank light magic in GPA before. There is an exception with Freesia using Samael last playthrough, but I also typically don't get a chance to use S-rank anima magic either. As it stands, I'd rather take this chapter reliably, so flyers and an A-team it is. We meet the final word in Axe Infantry, Dakini, and while I would very much like to hear what the female brigand scream is like, in an Axe unit I value strength more than speed, so I'm keeping Dale. Now you might not want to save the village as soon as you're able. I did that and one of my objectives started to bolt. Had to get the old noggin joggin to think of a way out of that mess. We get pretty secure, and then the bad guys do a pretty clear-cut case of necromancy, as well as sudden but inevitable betrayal. One of the spooks teleports away, and suddenly the enemy is down 2 units. We get Susan from the bottom village, who can actually just fly around the Air Caliber Sage and his poor attempt at area denial. Past experiences are good, can't really argue with Axe Wyverns. As we get closer, the next step of Bane's master plan is to raise even more dead, which gets the attention of Durga and her flunkies in the house that no one was in. Well, as long as they don't bust out like the Burger King, that's fine. The boss continues to summon more skelly mans than your average Necron player, and what's really bloody aggravating is the archer in the back corner locking out all 3 of my flyers. No, none of these summons are really a threat, but the dude didn't stop for 3 turns. Could be worse, could be Tanis Manor and Radiant Dawn, 5 turns of strong reinforcements if you don't clear the map in 10 turns. Once everyone regroups, you can rattle some bones and surround the boss. Another NOS boss, but you should be getting strong enough that he folds like paper. We exit with Durga getting ready to pursue, and I am very much looking forward to talking about that chapter. And Clovis believing the very trustworthy old man. we're finally getting to the good stuff. Okay, you ever play Advance Wars? Likely not, but there's a map in Advance Wars 2 that I never managed to beat, where Sonya has to use indirect combat units separated from Lash's units by mountains to stop her from reaching her HQ. This time, we're more in the place of Lash, and that sucks. Further, we have a requirement to not face any marked Wyvern Riders in combat. We've got to dodge Ballistae, then bait out Clovis, who won't join us immediately, but will ease up on the Wyverns in the mountains. Now, seems to me you have the choice of one tile to stand on if you want to avoid engaging the Wyvern Riders, and you may only need to avoid killing them, but better safe than sorry, while also avoiding the Ballista, which may be a non-factor with a tanky enough unit. Obvious choices for this one are Francine and Dale, or maybe Orion with a Lance Reaver. A common theme with DLATMOL, yeah, I'm done with that joke, is end of turn 1 events. In this case, some lady on a horse declares her intent to ambush us once we pass a threshold. If you deploy Luca, you'll get a pre-warning of this event. Both the fort boss and the reinforcement boss are a pain. Bort flat out doubled Francine and nearly killed her, and he'll probably have a few backup goons that you'll have to deal with. The druid on the fort hits really hard and doesn't take much damage, but is rather slow, and you do have tiles to rescue any attackers with flyer support. What looks like a daunting and very lethal map can actually be dealt with in a somewhat straightforward fashion. And while you have a small area to execute, there are a few options to execute with. Dealing with siege weapons is rarely fun, especially when often the only choice is to rush them headlong. This chapter gets it right by using them more for area denial. No need for the third option here, Dorius, the first option works just well enough. Chapter 14. This damn map. You see, it's a damn. Well, what's more offensive, an awful damn pun or me calling it a dyke instead? A past highlight of this chapter was Emma getting crit by a ballista, forcing her to restart after a few turns because of lost momentum. On this map you need to arrive at a tile on the other side of the map post-haste. Between you and that objective is a status staff, a ballista, a siege tome and a boss and a half. The enemies drop door keys to let you through the top route, but there's a blue gem and a Draco shield that I want to nick, so Ronnie's coming along. I'll be honest, with almost every other map up to this point, I felt like even the simplest of tactics was enough to get you through, and there wasn't much to stop you by way of sheer random chance. This map is different. Sure, I was lucky this time to dodge all 3 sleep staves, and I took the restore staff up there in case it did hit, but what if I critically needed to heal a unit at the same time because of some unlucky hits? It'd slow me down, possibly too much, and I'd have to start over. And so, after a few turns of shaky RNG dependence and 9 turns total of some actually pretty tame pushing and flank guarding, Durga will show up. You now have a harsh time limit, roughly 11 more turns by my reckoning, to not only do your objective, but stop her from reaching a specific fort tile. You can, if you're desperate, park someone on that fort tile and pray Durga can't one-round them. Fat fucking chance, given her bases and sword stat bonus, she's got the stats to tangle with the final boss favourably. Despite my need for haste, I stack up around the 2 fort tiles as I had a memory in the back of my head of dudes spawning all of a sudden once that threshold was crossed. Still, it has to be done, especially with those wyverns bearing down, and apparently my memory is faulty. Nevertheless, there was something that was bullshit after the forts, and it's that fucking armor knight with silvers. That's a dead Dale, by all accounts, even if he wasn't at base defense. I'd say a Lance Reaver would have been a safer bet, or maybe dancing up and killing the Armor Knight with an effective weapon. Either way, seems quite RNG dependent to me, though I'll admit to making a few mistakes, like not blocking Dale off with Francine. To further complicate matters, our haste must now be measured against trying to recruit Whitney. She'll reach us before Durga, no doubt about that, but it seems to me much better to just secure victory and then deal with the side objective. And of course I was right about enemy reinforcements spawning in the open field. That's an illegal move. Push past the boss, use a bit of dark magic against the Armor Knights, get Dale angry enough about a 37% hit to crit for the first time in this playthrough, I'm pretty sure, and finish the map. Here we finally see our tactician's big brain strategy come to fruition. If we're going to be dealing with Durga, the human cruise missile, then just pop her back into the water. Durga the Invincible is no more. Right? Right. Anyway, one of her henchmen makes it sound like he wants to go off and be an artist or something and leaves, and finally we check out what Voland is up to. Jenna's big magical surge has weakened her significantly and now she's on the back foot. Until Mox Molyon warps in, tells Voland to piss off, summons a druid, Gwilgi and... oh shit, 2 Necro Dragons. We're in for a rough patch. This was one of the maps I really wanted to talk about. I'm an idiot, so I didn't guess the plan, though I may have been too preoccupied with actually playing the chapter. Too few Fire Emblem games have you in a full retreat. DLATMOL isn't really an exception. This map is a retreat in part, but it is in fact advancing in the opposite direction through an enemy fortress. Gameplay and story combine excellently. The tactician is actually using their knowledge of the whole battlefield and environment to ensure victory. Sun Tzu would be proud. That and the split route around the mountain that still manages to converge at roughly the same time, this map is definitely one of the best in the game, I'd say the best so far, which is good because typically maps should be improving as the game goes on. This is absolutely a solid mid-game chapter with all the complexity that it can afford to bring. It's not perfect of course, I mentioned last chapter a headlong charge into siege weapons isn't ideal. Coupled with a status staff even with limited range, tactics can become a bit irrelevant in the face of RNG, beyond the obvious send strongest, send staff, reset until it works. Now I managed to get this chapter done without resetting this playthrough even though I probably should have, but by all means if you play this chapter for the first time, do not feel bad about resetting. As for Iron Manning, well, I can't help you there. Next up is one of the first multi-part chapters. Chapter 15 is going to take a while. Chapter 15 starts with... Eligor? Oh no. Well, luckily he's a Wyvern Rider, so he doesn't have a spear, so DLATMOL can continue to be a good hack, rather than a dogshit one. Back down to 12 slots, great. Well, given there's a short bow drop and my dumbass didn't buy some spare bows, and Luke is the highest level in the army, I'll drop him and see what Sherry can do. Susan is also coming along, owing to success in a previous playthrough, and Ronnie is needed to pinch that stat booster. Look, too many hacks make it a point to try to make thieves more useful. I get it, I just don't like it, and would rather the item just drop if I can kill the dude. This map definitely deserves to be known as a monster mash, and as usual at the end of turn 1, we get warned of something upcoming. In this case it's not relevant to the map, but the Minos gang are back. We didn't actually kill Moloch, and now he's spoiling for a fight. Vito and Eagle are locked up tight, but Vito interestingly doesn't have enough strength to one-round most of the monsters. If you're wanting to hold a choke point, this is ideal. Even with some unlucky rolls, you should be able to get to him in time. Reinforcements from the forts are pretty cheeky, spawning in with killer weapons. With enough 2 range they shouldn't be a problem. The bosses should be a non-issue, certainly Eligor folds before some triangle advantage and effective weaponry. But Dindu, despite 1 luck and a Devil Axe, refused to self-destruct, even getting an absolute bastard of a hit. Not a bad map, certainly less to it than previous, but that's fine as this is really 1/3 of a chapter, and the second third is quite impressive. Chapter 15 Part 2 actually has you start with the castle you just seized, as far as I can tell, down to the same tiles, -1 ballista. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Maximilian is at full power, holding a Lunar and Bolting Tome and escorted by 2 Necrodragons, who are all but guaranteed to do 27 damage to any unit. He also has a Kerberos, not a Gwilgi as they are in Sacred Stones, who is going to outspeed most of your army. On the bright side, we have, to my knowledge, the first dev commentary. Instead of FE7's Augury, an ingenious idea was had and it was replaced by something I've seen in no other ROM hack, which is a shame because in my mind a ROM hack is the perfect opportunity to put yourself into a Fire Emblem experience. Not like a self-insert, which I appreciate if there is a self-insert of DLATMOL dev, it's the Ratman or the Power Ranger. I mean playing Fire Emblem and putting a unique or interesting spin on the experience per your experiences with the series, and you could use dev commentary to explain the decisions made, or scrapped ideas, or how one tiny thing went wrong and you spent 2 hours trying to unfuck something before you just went to a previous version. ROM hacking isn't easy, but creative things like this make them worth making and well worth playing. So, what wisdom does the dev have in store for us? Well, he sure is succinct, if nothing else. Poison weapons galore here, so bring your antitoxins. Necrodragons, and I know in game they're called Draco Zombies, but I'm only ever going to call them Necrodragons. They're not something you want to underestimate. Bring your effective weapons, which does include bows. You have to hold for 9 turns. Make a retreat if at any point you feel you're in danger. Unless that danger is a Necrodragon, in which case honestly you might be fucked. This is a tough chapter. The monsters mean business and you're blocked from advancing into a preliminary strike by Ballistae. I should have lost a unit a couple of times for sure, Dale in particular, but outside of Francine, everybody has been getting some absolutely fucked growths. Dale is still at base defense and that isn't likely to change it seems. This is an onslaught you can only mitigate, not control, and one mistake means the all but certain death of a unit. The 9-turn limit is a generous one at least, and oftentimes the reinforcements can be dealt with easily by one or a pair of units. You've got the chokes, you've got the forts, you've got what you need to keep everyone alive. It's rare that a defense chapter really makes you play conservatively. There's something in particular about 15.3 that I'll mention in a moment, but 15.2? Hardest map so far, easily. Speaking of conservatism, a player other than myself ought to promote some units to make things a little easier, but I'm still holding out for level 20 unless things get dire. Mecha Max finally puts down Moloch, but not before the latter absolutely rips Max a new one, going out like a true war boss and putting an end to his au revoir.
Just because they were them.
Chapter 15.3 has a special Gaiden requirement, and unlike the last two Gaidens, you're going to have to work for it. After Max took an axe to the face, his stats were lowered enough that we can now safely engage him. Safely might not be the right word, but definitely without getting instantly destroyed. Now, depending on how well your inventory has been managed, you might be pretty desperate to hit those shops. I know I am. However, running away is the better part of Valor, so once that Berserker started bearing down on me, I decided I'd support the flying shopping trip. The reinforcements out of the forts on this map are a bit more of a threat than usual. Steel weapons and decent stats means you've got to be ready to take a nasty hit. We've got another Armonite prankster with silver weapons, but this one can be singled out and baited to attack a fort tile, so there's a lot less risk this time. There's no real good way to tackle the Necro Dragon aside from effective weaponry, and even then it left my entire left flank on single digit HP. Hopefully they'll become less of a threat once everyone promotes and gets some HP into them. You want to be sure nobody's going to die if they fight Maximilian, most importantly your Tactician. Hope you've got a Seraph in the convoy if they can't. But it's okay, the Tactician only needs to fight Maxi once and doesn't need to secure the kill. That's better left to someone with effective damage. Yeah, hit rates are dog shit, but just as you might need to plan for units not to hit, you can also plan for units to hit. The reinforcements from the rear could be dangerous if you've lagged a bit, but by the time you're up at max, you've got some very advantageous terrain, especially if you have the freedom afforded by taking out the Necro Dragon. Maxi can't believe he lost and he is declared dead. We're now approaching the one chapter I won't cover, sort of. See, there's an alternate chapter 16 if you don't fulfill the Gaiden requirements, or maybe the one I'll play is the alternate, whatever. Doing it this way feels like a sort of true route, until later on where there is a route split. I do intend to discuss both routes, but I'm going to play my route, then come back to talk about the other route's maps. It's my opinion you should endeavour to reach all Gaiden chapters and recruit all units, though I'll mention that I've never played 19XX Genesis in vanilla FE7. But first we do actually have to clear 15X, which, if I'm not mistaken,
In 10 minutes, yes, we'll fill the room. You have only 10 minutes to escape the gas. In this room, there's gas. If you breathe in the gas, you're gonna die.
okay, well I should be safe here.
Gas.
God damn it! Way back in chapter 3 I mentioned that restore staves might end up in short supply. In part, that's this chapter's fault. It's also my fault for my stubborn refusal to use antitoxins. Our deployment slots have been harshly cut down to 9 and we need a thief, as well as wanting to deploy Tact and Francine to gain support points. Okay, well deployment restrictions are more than just a low maximum number. Good news, Orion can promote. Even more good news, his sword's getting even bigger is intentional. The dev gets it, as we see in the commentary. Lady Necromancer sprite, huh? I did do a playthrough as the Lady Tactician in Tacthack once. Maybe one day I'll come back to DLATMOL and do a Lady Tact run too. The map has a turn limit, 18 turns to, as I like to say, steal everything that isn't nailed down. There's not a sword to be found on this map, but there is an axe reaver, so be careful. There's just mages, armor knights, and the boss's 2 pet soldiers. An unreachable siege weapon is again very annoying, but the consolation prize is even if you're almost certain to not take the bolting tome from the enemy, there is one in the chest he's standing on. This is the least worthwhile thing to loot from this chapter because the member card, Avers drops, and a failed contract is also here for the taking. As for this map's gimmick, I like it. It's subtle and keeps slipping my memory, especially because I did know what was coming and was prepared for it. I imagine most people's first experience with this chapter was similar to mine, where they either didn't see the gas traps or forgot they were there and immediately felt stupid for doing so. You don't have to blitz this chapter as fast as possible, 18 turns is quite lenient. Gaiden chapters so far are a little gimmicky but rather short. I'm going to tell you something important. The secret shop is on this chapter. If you want to find it for yourself, just skip to the next chapter. I'm basically done discussing this one. Okay, you good? Where's the secret shop? It's right here. Last playthrough, I don't think I found it. I'm pretty sure I nabbed the member card and spent the whole game waiting to find the secret shop. The first thing I noticed surveying the map this time around was the door past the boss, and mostly I dismissed it. Then I was told there is a secret shop on this map, and I put 2 and 2 together. A quick look around at all the tiles and I found it. And judging by the footage, something found me too. With the ROM breaking down around me, I buy some integral dragon slaying weaponry and off the boss. For the sake of consistency, I'm going to refer to the Chapter 16. I'm not playing as the alternate one. And I'd bet that the alternate Chapter 16 as an assault rather than a defense. That suits me better, as I don't think of it as being surrounded, but rather a target-rich environment. I'm employing something a bit more unconventional for me. I'm almost certain I've never used an unlock staff before in any FE game. However, no time like the present, and while I do have a spare lockpick, may as well use up the one I've got. Come turn 5, there's another sudden but inevitable betrayal and a bullshit crit, and suddenly monsters are appearing. However, very soon we'll have someone very special who should be able to deal with that particular problem. Good thing I took the time to check, because there's a very special prize waiting for us if we push. The Valkyrie lady had a berserk staff, but Weena here has boots. We have 7 turns to take our prize, and I bloody well intend to. Oh, that was easy. I'd like some more experience, please, and it seems I can chop this wiener at my leisure, so let's see what he's got. Oh, we also got Kiri, who I intend to put to immediate use. Kiri was on the buffs list, however given I'm certain 3 of them are buffed only in growths, and she seems to have 0 skill, even Naya had 1 skill, I'm gonna guess she's the same. Or maybe the Dragonstone got buffed, I don't know. After dealing with Wiener's shitty monster spawns, we do have an extra turn, and I could use it to see what he does, but I'd rather just steal his boots for myself than get a fun surprise. What's this? Ronnie broke double-digit strength? We are absolutely on the up and up with these growths. After the entirety of the early game getting pretty well buggered, or at least Emma stealing everyone else's good growths, the pendulum seems to have swung. As I write this, I'm worried about Commentator's Curse, but otherwise I'm pretty well chuffed. Thanks, past me. Anyway, this is a good defence map, wide open but with definitive flanks and not so overwhelming as to give you much pucker factor. You get a little bit of a surprise if you let the chapter play out, not just the walls allowing easy access to your defend point, but also little Wiener starts to approach. Again, you don't need to get the person in the cell out of the cell, but hey, 26 experience is 26 experience. And we also see our first obvious case of Dragon Boober. Also, she talks like a vampire, but she's supposed to be 1,000 years old or whatever, and you need to make her speech seem antiquated or foreign somehow. Kathy shows up with some holy boys after we do everything, and the chapter's over. This chapter probably marks the start of late game. Promotions are being handed out, and while my team is not 100% concrete, everyone fortunately seems to have enough stats to compete in their own way. We also finally get the payoff for dropping Arthur because we've gone from 1 staff to 2 if we deploy a dancer, which is definitely not a full-time staff job, to 4 staffers that can all heal almost any unit back up to full. One of a few reasons I say you can never deploy enough staves is because come promotion time it feels like they get handed out like candy. If you've played Sacred Trilogy, you'll know that goes doubly so for that game. Let's continue with DLATMOL. Fucking only hacks I've played that are good are FE7 hacks. What's up with that? It's a good thing there are so many trustworthy men about, otherwise this one friendly dude pointing us toward the cathedral we were going to visit anyway might rouse suspicion. The Tactician's half-sistered by some wine. By the way, Jenna and the Tactician have the same father, I think. Florence gets left at an inn, and we're off to another Fog of War chapter. Before we start, Dale and Shermie promote. Orion gets the boots because honestly I don't know who's a better recipient. We get more commentary. I like the slight nerd out over aesthetics, and while I don't intend to use Kathy, let's show off these feminine animations. Yeah, they look good. You might have noticed a few chapters ago that this hack uses different halberdier animations from most others, mostly drawing from, as the dev says, beta Ephraim animations. No complaints, it looks good, the individual look of a ROM hack is an important factor. As for Kathy as a unit, absolutely solid, the problem is her strength stat. Now Ty has been a bit screwed outside of his capped strength. In a crit class like halberdier, skill and luck are important stats. However, I am not dropping him, and more than likely he's going to be the one to use the pastrami. Then there's Jenna, and seems to me you'd have to be a fool not to use her. You know Pent? Yeah, Jenna is Pent. However, unlike Pent, I don't have a spare slot for her, or I would if I was a bit more selective and optimal with my unit choice. Maybe that makes me a great fool. Given that I know what's coming in terms of endgame, we'll see. The chapter, like I said, is Fog, and we have a new enemy. Affectionately referred to by me as Abombarombas, instead of Sacred Stone's Bales, we have Spider Ladies with weapon rank. Strong too, as I said, we're approaching late game, maybe even already there, so things are going to get harder quickly. We've got a few people to save and a few chests to loot. The one closest to us is a right taunting bastard, and it is a sudden reminder that there is no warp stuff in DLATMOL either. All I'm going to say is map design can be significantly more cohesive and robust when you don't have to worry about some nerd skipping half of it in the name of efficiency. Yeah, I guess it would be nice to warp Ronnie into that close room and loot it first thing. And yes, you could punish that by having an enemy SWAT team on the other side of the door, or you could circumvent the whole arms race by just not having warp staves. Look, I know this can be a touchy subject, and I absolutely don't condone the removal of warp from games that kind of need them, mostly Marty's games. As for echoes, well, nobody ever played Gaiden, and the loss of infinite warp was mitigated by healers leveling in a normal fashion and being a somewhat different game, to my experience. Anyway, DLATMOL, we've got to save Dorothy, Ty's sister, and regroup with the Brahma Faithful, led by Nox, who is absolutely hiding his power level. We also have a turn limit, which is only a problem for all the juicy loot. I'm a sucker for these split path to converging forces maps. If you can pull it off, it'll make your map seem way better than it is actually. Not that this is a bad map, though I'd certainly have a higher opinion of it if I could see what was on it. I'm not sure if it was bad rolls, stupid AI, or both, but turns out you might actually need to defend the objective on this objective defend map. After 5 turns, Nox will be attackless, which is different to defenseless. I noticed that the big zombie would take 3 hits to kill him, so not quite at my leisure could I reinforce him, but certainly I wasn't desperate. As for the trustworthy man in the centre, yeah, that's Gamliel, and he's going in the sin bin so Ronnie can loot what's under him. Sadly, I didn't have the foresight to dump him against the wall in the vain hope the Necrodragon might try to kill him. After that, there's not much coming out of fog, certainly nothing I can see, but they can see me. Aside from a surprise or two coming out of the fog, this map is rather merciful. Past experience with defense chapters in fog has me expecting relentless reinforcements, but there's a whole empty field that in a hack with less restraint would no doubt have some sort of uber monster. Of course. Where else would he be? The first Necrodragon instilled some slight panic, but at least thanks to Ronnie's rat vision I could prepare. The second one instilled no panic, overwritten as it was by resignation. Still, some last minute support point gaining, hopefully, and the chapter is cleared. Chapter 18 is definitely one of the sillier maps. We're finally going to kill Raum and end this war. No surprises or jack-in-the-box moments in this chapter, no sir. Well, the commentary has something different to say. Raum is certainly a master of sieges. This map is defined by one central feature. I'll call them snake runs. Single tile wide chokes that allow the enemy to bombard you. Enemies on this chapter also have quite a bit to throw at you. Some enemies mix effective weaponry with Reaver weaponry, others just flat out have 2 silvers, a common and effective strategy. There's a status staff, some siege magic, a ballista, powerful 2 to 3 range bows, you name it, they've got it. There's plenty to loot, and hopefully you've got a few spare chest keys because while Ronnie takes the centre room, you'll still want to be looting. Thankfully, there's no turn limit, and aside from tactician stars which remain broken, there's no incentive to rush. I have one complaint. The enemy gets way too many 1 to 2 range weapons for how restricted 1 to 2 range is for the player. I know this is deliberate, and making them scarce is a better idea than making them never double or have 20 weight or other stupid ideas that stupid ROM hacks have. I just see 2 armor knights with a short spear each, and honestly get a bit jealous. Pushing a mix of moving and not moving enemies aside, we push into the centre and up the 2 lanes and begin our slog through indirect fire. Of course, you can exploit the enemy. Watch this fucking idiot. Now, watch a different idiot. Me. Yeah, that didn't exactly go according to plan. Still, only 5 uses, so bear it and move in. Khan is an interesting unit, very much the opposite of what you'd expect and likely have. High defense but low speed, as opposed to Sherry who has a high speed but low defense. He's also got more range than Arjun has move, so like Shinon you've got to bait him out. Unlike Shinon, however, you don't kill him, and in fact once Arjun convinces him to stand down, he'll remain hostile. Just don't step into his range and you're fine. The dog reinforcements bearing down on us are a nuisance, but nothing that can't be handled. You could hold them in the snake run or use the choke point just above it. Facing off against the big man Raum himself, he does a VGTG, we do a VGN, VGTA, and then when we kill him, a VGW. Then when the walls open up we do a VGS, especially because Dale is out of position. With Gusto indeed Raum, assuming someone is in range. Again, you're not really surrounded, you have a target-rich environment. The sudden reinforcements are very little threat to you, having assembled your full force in the throne room as is common sense when fighting a boss and per Arjun's advice. This is not the same as Mr. Surprise coming back to life even stronger, but I suppose it is similar enough in spirit. Luckily, Raum actually poses very little threat against your powerful units and a bit of triangle advantage. The Regent is dead. Your invasion is successful. But oh no, who could have foreseen this? Maximilian is alive. He's not on your side, but he's not here to fight. He is instead here to warn you about the spooky gang and their voodoo bullshit coming to a head. Apparently they don't need the pastrami to break open the lock to their god, and now the palace town is on fire. All in all, this is another map that has some tactics completely fall to the wayside in the face of RNG, but if you're not a total goof, that can very much be mitigated, and you can absolutely use the terrain to your advantage just as the enemy does. Haste is somewhat rewarded, though clearing this map in 20 turns might not sound fast. It's probably on par, and as the turns go by you will have to do things like stop the enemy thieves. Not a conventionally difficult map. After so many promotions, your dudes have got a significant power spike, but that's going to come crashing down next chapter. Said chapter is probably going to be the hardest so far. And guess what? It's all going to get harder from here. You cunt. Chapter 19 has another everyone says what they think moment, with the army being split between Orion and Freesia's callousness and desire to serve the greater good by letting the palace town and civilians burn, and Tact, Francine and Arjun's desire to save the people and secure more information from the Dark Sect, because Maximilian is clearly trying to take us on a ruse cruise. I like watching Freesia get angry and remain angry because she's a fucking psycho and is super upset about people not listening to her. The Tactician also displays some excellent interpersonal sleuthing, where Tacthack's Tactician bettered themselves with book smarts and new strategies. DLATMOL's Tactician has worked to become as ruthless and conniving as their father. Both are good in their own ways. Tacthack's is way more satisfying, but DLATMOL's might be better in terms of actually bettering the mind for war. Commentary is another little insight into the mind of the dev. As someone who once tinkered with ROM hacking, I can only imagine the tedium of writing an event where every recruited unit talks twice. Of course, it might be less tedious if I were to try it, given my planned hack had only 4 units. This is a standard route map, but there are also numerous villages to secure. Form your strategy as usual, with plans in mind to take the villages. You will have to adapt in a very particular way as the chapter goes on, but I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. White Knight. Oh ho, that's rich. Fortunately, as you start the chapter, Bishop Nox warps in and says he can warp civilians out, so that's more or less a worry off your mind. There's still everything else to worry about though. Keep a tight formation and get through. Oh, and you may want to send Ronnie down the right flank. Our standard turn 1 reveal has Eligor mentioning attacking from the rear and the other guy mentioning her arrival before leaving. Now, I know what I'm in for. That doesn't mean I can prepare myself accordingly, especially because I don't remember her pattern. If you know what I'm talking about, then you understand. If not, well, buckle up. After blitzing pretty hard and getting a lucky dodge, by merely turn 4 have I moved Ronnie to the inn and recruited Ada. Ada is an important character, eventually revealed to be part of some hidden conspiracy group that you don't learn about until post-game. That would be a big deal, except we don't learn anything other than this conspiracy exists. Why in the hell did I not replace Ronnie with her last playthrough, aside from out of sheer spite? Actually, that was probably it. So at the end of turn 4, you see what I mean about knowing what's coming, mostly, but not being prepared for it. I can't believe the Delphi Shield is on such a short turn limit. Now you might be thinking, 8 move and 3 range, there's no way I can avoid that. Luckily it doesn't actually move, but it will incinerate anything within 3 tiles, so fucking run. With my heart rate increased by a decent amount, we've still got a few more villages to secure and we had better hustle. Not to mention Eligor is yet to appear, so we have to stay on our toes. Having cleared most of the map, turn 10 decides to give us a surprise. The dragon's second spawn point is much clearer in my head because I really wanted the black gem but couldn't get it. I mean, Ada could steal it, but she'd end up like MILF Jerky, so it's a moot point. Ronnie just so happens to be right next to the big bastard, though his inventory is full. Whoops. With a slight adjustment, Ada steals the black gem like she would have last time, but this time I also employ the old wizard strategy of fly you fools. And fly actually does, very fast, very far away, because holy shit the dragon has too many stats. Eligor's reinforcements being entirely flyers, you can easily mop them up with your bow units. It appears I traded poor early game growths for several lucky dodges throughout the game. Turns out Khan takes 11 times 4 from Eligor, and he has 44 HP. This, I imagine, was deliberate and brings further distaste for all things Eligor, spear or not. Bait with someone else, Francine might be a better shout. Then have Ronnie steal his much needed speed wings. Mop up, job's done. What a map. Definitely easier by a huge margin when you know what to do, even in an approximate sense. The dev might really like the fire effect, but I'll be honest, I was a bit too worried on actually playing the game to take notice. The dragon is by far the coolest thing about the map. Francine offhandedly mentions how it was circling, which no doubt in your mind's eye you can picture retrospectively as it jumps from the top left of the map to the bottom right of the map. It's also something I think Fire Emblem tends to be too afraid to do, a threat that you simply cannot engage, especially this late in the game. Closest thing I can think of is the Black Knight, and maybe Evil Harden. Garnef too, I guess, but that's it. Also yes, this man's name really is Boots. Why he doesn't drop Boots, I don't know. Can't make too much fun of him. You might have noticed a few bosses in Tacthack have names like Cannoli, Strudel and Baklava. I guess Tact Guy would develop his hack while he was hungry. The last thing, and the pivotal moment of the chapter, is the route split between the heretical lands of Ahribaal and the Cotanese plains. I have it on good authority that DLATMOL dev bizarrely likes the Sasay maps of FE6. I've got no experience, thus no opinion, as FE4, 5 and 6 are the FE games I haven't played. I played Echoes, I don't feel the need to play Gaiden. Sasay's reputation does precede it though, and I look forward to experience it for the first time after I've beaten the game, because I'm going with the devil I know. Chapter 20 Ahribaal can lick my Ahribaal bag. A common sentiment it seems, as corroborated by the dev commentary. This map's gimmick is that there are constant tile changes, something I have no doubt was incredibly painful to do. I understand the basic concept, and given enough time and motivation, I think I could recreate the tile changing events. Tile changes are actually quite simple, just tedious. Plan of attack is to use Ashley's capped strength stat and Fiana's high speed stat to alpha strike the bow warrior and air caliber mage and secure the bottom ruins. After that, try to keep everyone on dry land and really go from there. I know there'll be reinforcements, and I know this chapter is an ungodly difficulty spike, and I'm expecting to need to reset. If any chapter is going to make me do it, it's this one. We're not completely boned because Raccoon has arrived from Urnterade somehow and will join us in the battle. Given the immediacy of enemy action, he's absolutely going to see plenty of use, and with a strat I really enjoy employing but haven't been able to use thus far: box strats. The reinforcements are rather non-stop, combine that with the unpredictable nature of the swamp, and the best piece of advice I can give is keep moving, don't sit around in one spot. If you remain mobile, then when the swamp opens up fully, you can fully exploit it as one big group rather than trying to regroup after being split by the swamp. I ended up getting bogged down by the Berserk staff, and it was only my overpreparedness and a bit of serendipity that saved me. A lot went wrong, but enough went right. Restore being D-rank, Chandra having D-rank staves and being close enough to Orion and his convoy, and Luca being tucked away in the corner meant that the situation happened to be under control. The flyers got a bit bogged down at the bottom, and with the spawn of a silver bow Maleduin, I thought for sure I was buggered. Again, overpreparedness in the form of Susan as the extra flyer and moving as far away as possible saved Fianna from certain doom, because guess what, I've only got one Delphi shield. And my convoy is now full. I should have everything I need, but I recall there's the standard FE7 shopping chapter in DLATMOL before endgame, which will for sure be incredibly welcome. I've decided that Orion is underperforming, possibly because I didn't give him Alpha's drops, and I'm going to try to fast lane him up to level 20. I'd really rather not have to burn an energy drop on a unit that previously capped strength well before promotion. Maybe Ronnie's stealing his growths. Anyway, don't take too long to deal with the bosses because every second turn 2 Necro Dragons will spawn. I want to be done with this chapter, so I'm not sticking around to farm them, though I will kill the 2 that showed up before seizing because the opportunity presented itself. This is a headache of a map, but quite unlike anything else I've seen. FE7 had that Gaiden chapter, but that was quite simply taking away large blocks of tiles that mostly just impeded you in an annoying way, as opposed to this chapter where tiles come and go in small amounts, just enough to connect the islands, and when they go away and you find someone out of position, it feels more like your fault, or the fault of the enemy units pushing you back, rather than a platform just disappearing. The bottom part of the map is a chin scratcher for sure. You can secure the ruins easy enough, but how are you supposed to approach the ballista without a Delphi shield? Maybe it actually fulfills its purpose as a no-fly zone, and the enemy Sword Reaver Cyclops and Zerkers, Gargoyles and Wyvern reinforcements would require further box stratting by your main force, perhaps intentionally constricted on the islands. It doesn't seem like the boss can one-hit anyone with her siege magic, but I definitely wouldn't want to be dealing with that and other attacks on the same turn without a dedicated magnet, which seemed to be Ronnie. I'm sure you could finagle a magnet strat amongst the box strat. It's the sign of a good map, I'd say, where you can theorise about a fair few different strategies and how you have to tackle a map with tools you have. Without a Delphi shield, a door is closed. If you'd use bolting, the opening would be riskier because of the air caliber sage. If your restore staves aren't in order, a berserk unit can start to wreak havoc because for some ungodly reason you can't block them. The chapter progressing in a segmented fashion and then eventually fully opening up is also not something typically seen. For sure, most maps that would try to be dynamic in such a fashion would likely close off areas seeing them as redundant. I wouldn't say any part of the map is redundant once you move past it, even if it's just the fact that reinforcements will spawn there. I remember endgame kicking my shit in, but for the moment I'll put the claim as Ahribaal chapter 20 as the hardest chapter in the game.
Chapter 21 is unfortunately not the last Fog of War chapter in the game, but it does look mercifully short and sweet. Not a lot of space, seems like a very compact map. Of course, that might mean enemy density has increased significantly too. There's a Gaiden chapter requirement: clear this map in 15 turns. Given the size of it, I can't really see that being a big problem. I'm going to save some of my torch uses for that Gaiden. I know what's coming and I also really want to talk about it. Taking a page out of Ghost Ship's book, the most dangerous threat is death goyles out of fog. They're fast and strong, and if you don't know where they are, they can easily kill one of your units. The gimmick of this map, as forewarned, is that the boss is apparently invincible. However, there are 2 houses where you spawn and a 3rd one with an important post-game lady that have information about what to do. Torching up the right and you'll notice a sage marked as a boss. You might also notice when you beat him that he doesn't award experience. The map lays it out very clearly. You have to kill the main boss at the same time you kill the last of these 3 bosses scattered throughout the map. They're in pretty obvious locations, even with fog you can pinpoint them. Now, executing this is a problem wholly down to Fuadis being absurdly strong. 27 speed is more than enough to double almost everyone in your army. Combine that with her Throne of Void and you'll be lucky to break a 70% hit rate. However, her sword is magic, so your mages can laugh off her attacks. A neat little map, very much a needed break after the headache that was the previous chapter. It was bad enough with Mr. Surprise. I think I'll just do as the map says and continue in ignorance as to what happens if you don't do this map right. We learn that civilians don't grant experience points, and that 1 out of 3 of the Darkseid's leadership are reasonable. We can't judge too harshly, only 2 out of 3 people leading our army are reasonable. Fucking psycho bitch. We also see phrases like 3 houses and light and dark, so I think the game is becoming self-aware. Yeah, I thought I'd just let the dev commentary introduce this one. He's right, this is one of the chapters I was most looking forward to discussing. Now, cutting the deployment slots down to 7 is harsh, but it makes sense. Definitely bring your best. I know speed is a factor here, but I think deploying infantry that can all keep up with each other might be a safer bet. I would call this map an arena map. One of your units, best bet is Orion, is locked in a room and it's your job to hit a certain tile and rescue him. There's no incentive to have Orion fight any more than he has to. None of the enemies in the arena grant experience. I think there could have been more done with the arena, but I'm thinking of porting Radiant Dawn tower tiles like Wardwood into the arena, which sounds like a pain, so it's not a huge deal. There are in fact 2 arenas, and the Tactician goes in next. This is much more dangerous as the Tactician doesn't have convoy access and can't teleport an elixir in if things get dicey. I had to reset this chapter last playthrough and I was none too happy about it because the enemy Maleduin came 8 tiles out of fog with no prior line of sight and one-shot Shermie with a Sword Slayer. Again, try to justify Fog of War. Why can't I move Orion 10 tiles out of fog and snipe an enemy with a steel bow with no prior line of sight? How's that less unfair? I fucking hate Fog of War. Anyway, we get a Hammer, which makes me feel bad about binning Capricornus. We do an infantry rescue chain, which is a lot less exciting than a normal cavalry rescue chain, and we prepare to take the body ring and also fight the boss, I guess. He's no joke, he's going to hit, and he's going to hit very hard. Yes, he's slow, but that's the only saving grace. And despite his poor speed, he still has more than enough avoid. Like most Gaiden chapters in DLATMOL, it's fun. It's got a unique gimmick that is done very well. I like it. Good job. FE7 probably has the best title drops of the series. Yes, as you really should have expected, Durga is alive. The mention of the Malkaean coast brings a memory from one playthrough where an enemy Skellyman came 6 tiles out of fog with a bow and 5x3 Myrrh at a 2% chance. Then on another playthrough I watched an enemy get a 1% crit on the same map. It is a cursed fucking map and I refuse to play it anymore. But here, yes, the inspiration is very clear. The deployment limit continues to swell all the way up to 16. It can't hurt to give Arjun a chance, even if the drops went to the Tactician to alleviate his middling performance. Looks like another standard slog. We're approaching endgame and dangerous things like Silvers and Necro Dragons are in abundance. Reavers, siege weapons and promoted flyers are also here to catch you off guard. By around turn 8, a Berserker reinforcement will also make their way to the top ruin and destroy it. It's guarded by a Necro Dragon, Siege Tome, 2-3 range Giant Bow, and Abomination with High Mage and Thimble Vetatome. I'd start praying if you don't have a decently bulky flyer with a Delphi shield, because pushing past the mountains and those mixed attackers is incredibly rough. The right and middle of the map are incredibly tame by comparison. The Tarvos and Maleduin reinforcements can actually be taken out by a slightly well-levelled Arjun with Carmen. While the eyeballs can be destroyed risk-free by Chandra. Turn 10 is when shit hits the fan, Durga gets bored and starts to come for you. Another element of unpredictability you really don't need, especially because she's got a posse of heroes with varied weapons joining her. There is good news, she refuses to use a sword, so you can bait her out with anyone fast and bulky enough that isn't Orion. Given their equal speed stat and Durga's backup of a rune sword hero, I thought Dale with a Sword Reaver would do a good job. With her sword catcher out just as planned, Tai did his thing. I am so glad I bought 3 Guandaos. After that, your trials are over. It's a small matter of mopping up. Remembering that there is still a Necro Dragon up there, and dealing with a very non-threatening boss. I'm certain there is a boss conversation between Durga and Arjun, but I just did not have the time for that. Durga will also join after this chapter with no special requirement. Compared to Shermie, last playthrough she was almost flat out better, with Shermie staying around because she could use the gold brand. Similar story here, but I'm expecting Shermie to overtake her. I wouldn't rate this chapter necessarily harder than the previous ones, but you are a lot more susceptible to RNG fuckery. I didn't reset on the previous 3 chapters. I had to reset a few times on this chapter. Once when I realised I couldn't get to the top ruin in time, once when I tried to have Ashley rush it to no avail, and once when Arjun was getting dogshit levels. I did try these different strats, but ultimately I mostly did the same as the first time with a bit more haste. Ashley still baited out the enemy wyverns, but immediately pivoted to the left side for the ruins, and I made Orion absolutely bolt past the mountains, and used Dale's mountain walking to get him through too. Tact went up there to dispense heals, and Tai went up there for general crit support. Mounts all went to the right because it's open terrain, and Kiri and Chandra handled the middle by themselves. Maximilian trade offers us. We receive Weaver's severed head, Grizzly, Goldbrand and Durga. He receives nothing at all, don't worry about it, haha. We're off to endgame. Maximilian insists on holding off several dozen dudes by himself while we descend into a lair of spooky ghosts. Freesia isn't joking around. I took her advice last time and I intend to do it again. Sadly, I think Francine's time is done, partially because Emma's been on the roid, and partially because while advice of investing a speed wing into her and being hunky-dory is appreciated, I'd rather spend it elsewhere. I'm not handing out all of my boosters, just most of them, and it's mostly patching units' weaknesses up. The Tactician has been boosted by Apha's drop, so he's not getting any. To the map, this is what I prefer endgames to look like. Your elite army versus an almost equally strong and equally sized elite enemy. I had to reset on this one too. Turns out taking a mixed magical and physical assault is best left to Orion. I was really expecting reinforcement from the bottom closed off walls, maybe they appear if you take too long. Once separated, the enemies can be picked off at your leisure, except with the case of the left flank as I mentioned. Moving up to the boss, you can probably one-shot the Skelly Man with Kiri, but I couldn't get her in range. And we have another surprise, again not as bad as Mr. Surprise and his fun surprise, but there's a second boss to fight, quite a bit more dangerous than the Skelly Man. Still, against overwhelming numbers, he'll fall. Orion takes his sweet sword and gets a pretty huge power boost, and we're on to another chapter that stuck out as very interesting, although for very different reasons to all the rest. I dubbed this chapter Walk and Talk. Yes, we are throwing basically all pretense of gameplay away for solemn flashbacks and lore dumps. No better time than this, I suppose, to discuss Freesia and why she's such a fucking psycho bitch. We know that she's Brahma's daughter and she despises the dark sect and their worship of the Unspoken One, but her hatred runs deeper than mere light versus dark, good versus evil. Something personal had to have happened to her. The destruction of her dragonkin was Max Power's doing. While he was allied with the dark sect, it wasn't the sect themselves that brought about the destruction. And what about housing the Sanguine Codex in her own temple? The dark sect's most powerful and treasured artifact housing all knowledge gained by the Unspoken One. A case of friends close and enemies closer perhaps. I might talk more about what the Codex might possibly be later on, but for now we can answer the question of why Freesia gets so fuck mad angry about the sect. Yes, Brahma was killed by the Unspoken One, Tacthack, and Freesia rewrote history for the benefit of humankind to save them from the despair and grief of losing their goddess. Playing Truth, Despair and Hope last chapter pays off a bit better now knowing this. So the map, nothing doing, just move your dudes. I don't think there's ever been a chapter like this in FE proper. The execution has to be on point for something like this to work, and it does here. We're in the endgame, everything is culminating into this final battle, the stakes are high, and learning more context around the upcoming battle raises them even higher. These endgame chapters were an absolute turning point for me. Prior, yes, the hack was good with a lot of unique map ideas, and the additional gameplay elements of things like FE8 monsters and 3x effectiveness added some freshness and excitement. But having the guts to do a chapter with no combat right before we fight the ultimate threat built up over almost the entire game, and having the know-how to do it well, I still don't personally like it better than Tacthack, but I'll say that it may very well be better than Tacthack. I might put it like this: DLATMOL's sum of parts are excellent, but Tacthack's whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Or personal opinion, you know. Let's go fight the masked man. Fuck yeah, here we go! Can you really fault the dev for using Twilight of the Gods for this one? I certainly can't, it's bloody well earned it. There's not much between us and the boss, but once we get to him, oh boy are we in for it. These are some ridiculous stats, not seen since the likes of Siegfried. Only legendary weapons, minus Gaidens, plus the Profane Blade, can hope to scratch Tacthack. Pinch the legendary weapons off the enemies and square up to the boss. Tacthack puts out so much damage that my main healers don't have enough magic to sustain them with just one use of Fortify. Not ideal, but alright, we're doing good damage to him and we have control of the situation. Now we just need to...
Teleport!
Fuck. Oh, good thing Tacthack also has the power of Rain of Spiders, just what we needed. I was prepared for this, but that doesn't make it any easier to deal with. At least with the power of the Profane Blade, most of the trash can be cleared up with no real worry. I seem to recall last playthrough I got a lucky crit, probably Shermie with the Gold Brand. Here's hoping for a repeat. Well, sort of. I've got him down to the wire. I'm short 5 damage and... Oh wow, I forgot Dunbol's hits absurdly hard. That's a guaranteed kill. I've got him. I can beat the game just by... Wait, what about Maximilian? Yes, on my previous playthrough, when I played through this chapter, I was about to beat Tacthack and a little thought popped into my head. I've been faked out. This isn't the end. I was quite impressed, both with the game for duping me and myself for being unduped at the very last moment. This was a focal point of my initial pre-idea of wanting to talk about DLATMOL when I beat it back in February 2021. No FE game story set up to such a climactic event only to pull the rug out from underneath you so effectively. So much focus is given to Tacthack and this final battle. You have legendary weapons, almost your entire army is promoted. It has the absolute feel and even look of Endgame, that's the Dragon's Gate tileset. But it isn't Endgame. Bravo! The pacing of this game's story is fantastic, and while Tacthack does something similar with Mr. Surprise and Yormund the Mighty, the story makes it clear that you are to go through Mr. Surprise to get to Yormund and beat the game. Here, you know Maximilian is still out there, not to be trusted, conniving and scheming as early as Chapter 9, but nothing is said of it in all 3 parts of this chapter after you part ways. So guess what? We're off to go face Maximilian, and fake Endgame is going to be considered a walk in the park by comparison. Maxie's back. Tell a friend. Yes, dev commentary called it. He's well aware of what he's responsible for. As for a hard map, this one has definitely caused a few resets. If you haven't noticed it by now, enemies with good kit are here to stay. Silvers, Reavers, Lunas, and then there's Max Stats himself. Now you can get boss conversations with Max, and theoretically yes you can defeat him. The juice is not worth the squeeze however. I doubt you can just end the game here by beating Max now. More than likely he'll warp away after saying great job, and he doesn't even drop anything, probably to encourage you to stay the fuck away. This is probably the widest map in the game. Both villages are blocked by terrain, but given my unit composition involves one flyer, I've little choice but to go around for one of them, the top one specifically. It's closer and there's no siege weapon bearing down on it. Since I dropped Francine, I have 2 choices, a Dancer or a low strength and not fast enough Pegasus Knight. Yeah, Dancer it is. The reinforcements on this map are also non-stop, but they spawn far enough away that you can usually mop up each wave before tackling the next. The only trouble I had were all the Swordslayer dudes when Ty was busy holding the top choke all by himself. I didn't really have an answer beyond magical bombardment, which does tend to work quite well. As the map progresses, more and more mini-bosses will spawn. First Mistlove, then Fua, then Eligor, and finally Max will start moving. It's well paced, and you really feel your unit's strength as you chop them down one by one. I saw a Berserker spawn in the bottom right and knew I had to get a wriggle on. I'll trade an inconsequential 9% hit for the Killer Ballistae not hitting. As for Killer Ballistae as a whole, super bullshit can just ruin your day by deciding to kill any of your units at the tail end of enemy phase. I've seen it happen too many times. Fortunately, the only Ballistae crits coming out were from Sherry, and only one, and to my surprise I didn't have to reset this chapter once. I think last time I had a problem with trying to force Arjun and his continual getting crit, as well as pretty inflexible thinking, unlike this time where Ronnie took an elixir from the convoy and traded it over to the side with no healers. Quickly back to Sherry, there are very few opportunities where players can use Ballistae much less effectively. There's that chapter in Radiant Dawn where Shinon and Rolf can help with the Laguz offensive, and there are the ballisticians from FE11, but other than that, nothing I can think of, so well done here. Being allowed to have effective use of a ballista makes sense as you're supposed to be defending a fortress. Lastly, Max Mover isn't going to be in range of anyone by the final turn, and if he is, you'll have the opportunity to, move out of his range. The map is cleared, Florence arrives. Max has a fake hissy fit, which is honestly rather amusing. And then he fucking promotes right in front of you. We're boned. Hey, remember that FE7 Gaiden chapter I briefly mentioned in chapter 20? Yeah, this is it. Well, the tile said at least. So Maximilian didn't die, and somehow Zahak returned. No one's ever really gone. Nah, I'm kidding. There's a very self-empowering theme taken to a fantastical extreme in DLATMOL, so you will learn later that Zahak being A-OK after supposedly having his life force drained is actually pretty justifiable. Aside from the previous comparison, I was also put in mind of that Marth game chapter where there's a castle with a thin path around it and a thief nicks either a sphere or a shard, and I had to reset because he got away. It's very foggy, but you might know the one. Anyway, this chapter has something fun: allied monsters. Now mostly I'd say that green units throughout DLATMOL have been above average, and I recall the allied abominations very much holding their own. We have to defend Zahak, should be easy given his stat block, but sadly he's been nerfed significantly. Yeah, surprising that we're defending someone who can die rather than a 60 def res unit. So first thing I'll mention is the enemies can swim. That'll really help you formulate a plan of defense if you know that. I didn't, must have forgot. Unlike last chapter, this is a much more constricted and much less wide chapter, so reinforcements can easily overwhelm you. You've got support. The allied monsters like to take a bit of aggro and throw enough percentages down range that they end up hitting. I was rather hoping to try to bait the Necro Dragon out with Kiri, but constant bottom reinforcements pulled the plug on that plan. The grounds around Zahak are tight enough that responding to face more overwhelming opponents is not a problem. You should get to the chest with a lovely gold gem by turn 8, though you might have to send a cav or flyer to get there in time. So I have definitely forgot about this chapter almost in its entirety. You want to talk about new things? How about a mid-chapter map change? How do I not remember this? This is fantastic though, not without problems. There are siege tomes everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It'd put that one Awakening map to shame, and we only have 11 turns to get to the top and seize the throne. Thomas has been busy getting swole, and there's another chest I want, but I'm fresh out of chest keys, so Ronnie will have to make his way over there. Oh, and I can't deploy everyone where I like, which mostly means Ashley can't fly over and poke the first Eclipse Druid to death. Actually, she can't do that anyway, because that's apparently double impassable terrain. Honestly, with how strong Orion is, he can mostly just blitz into the enemy with the Profane Blade and clear the right flank by himself. I find the cav reinforcements are a little redundant. Everything about the map is screaming for you to finish it as quickly as possible, and even though the boss is a juggernaut, you'll still be able to move far enough away to avoid them. I do like the joke with the reinforcement boss though. A spot of staff juggling gets Ronnie into the chest, and a little more staff juggling gets the sleep off the front line. I decide there's no time like the present and promote Arjun. Luca gets some lucky crits, and I am out of here. The Dandy gives his everything to fight Maximilian to no avail. Got to admit, Tacthack never pulled on my heartstrings like this, but overall that game has much more focus on theming of triumph rather than being emotionally well-rounded like DLATMOL. Not a complaint, this is effective. I don't know about you, but I cared about the Dandy and his sister, and I'm sad to see him go. Shopping time. There are no requirements for this Gaiden chapter, you just get it. Not much to say, use that gold gem to fund your expedition into the final chapters of the game. Bring silvers. Sadly no arena, Arjun sure could use an experience boost. We get some presents from some old friends. Francine won't be getting that tomahawk, Dale will, and actually Francine can't be deployed in this chapter. 15 turns is a bit much I feel, especially with no arena, and with no commentary this chapter. I can't guess what the dev was thinking with 15 turns when you can get 99% of your shopping done in 2 or 3 turns. It's not a big deal, a minor complaint. I might be missing something, but I doubt it. Let's move on. So in a nutshell, Eligor is a morph, a being of pure quintessence by my understanding. DLATMOL continues to take the basic concepts of FE7 and honestly just execute them better. He doesn't actually start on the map, something we've not seen since chapter 1, but we have to defeat 2 bosses for this chapter. Yes, just 2, and the other one is Rhea, not that one. See, obviously Rhea and Rhea are completely different names. Still unconvinced IS isn't stealing from ROM hacks. Zahak ponders if he's in a Fire Emblem game or not, and we ready for battle. In a way, all these endgame chapters are rather samey, lots of dudes with strong stat blocks and nice kit, with a bit more leaning on status staves in this chapter. The opening is certainly explosive, and honestly I'm not sure a party split is necessary. There's no turn limit that I'm aware of, and the only benefit is gaining experience, which is granting diminishing returns so close to the end. Still, the opportunity presents itself, so I'm going to take it. Cavalry up one way, infantry the other. I hope you're also excited to see some promoted Arjun in action. Hey, he's axing you a question. The question is, why is his axe so big? You're constantly accosted by enemy reinforcements as you move through the map. And honestly, I need a bigger box. And 2 Necrodragons is just bloody unfair. Well, it would be, but... Attempts to advance are further waylaid by troublesome reinforcements until it culminates in Eligor spawning from the Clown Car Fort. Still no spear, but instead a Brave Lance, doesn't really count. I'd be more upset about the prospect of missing out on a second Delphi shield, but the way my team has panned out with just one flyer, it's not sorely missed. Besides, Naya happened to be invaluable on this map. Of course, she wouldn't necessarily be invaluable with the power of Shove, but I digress. The final part of the chapter is a squeeze through a long entrance guarded by a Necro Dragon and Siege Tome. The latter is much more trouble. With the aforementioned Naya, the Necro Dragon was disposed of with no risk, though again, Shove would have been just as useful. The Siege Mage gets bonked for being a pain, and then we square up to another Juggernaut boss. She has it all, equal defences, high speed, high hit rate and attack power. Good thing you outnumber her 16 to 1 and should have at least 4 staves. The boss asks for Freesia and Kiri, and I oblige, achieving very little. Orion continues to make up for all the missed strength growths and is on track to cap it by cap. Then we have to beat the Fire Dragon from FE7, except it's even stronger and has 1 to 3 range, so the room has gone from being cramped to needing evacuation. Your legendary weapons are your best bet here. You might not need to use a fortify if you have enough space and cavs. There's also space above the throne for your dudes to get out of the way. The Super Fire Dragon falls, and we're left wondering, if the Fire Dragon was the final boss of FE7 and that was harder, how hard is the final boss going to be? If you don't know, then you don't know. A big storm is coming, but for now, let's move on to the end game, the real end game. It even says final, and wrap this thing up. I think it's interesting that Tacthack believes Maximilian capable of creating Eligor on his first go, when Max himself said Eligor was the third attempt. I'd say Tacthack has the right idea of overestimating Max rather than underestimating. Endgames typically involve party splits, this one is no exception, though your party starts split rather than being forced into doing so. What's better, to split and converge, or be converged then split? It depends, but we'll deal with what we have. Our objective is to stand on unique tiles, again, to open up the map and the throne room so we can seize and move on. The left flank has siege tomes to deal with, the centre is going to be swarmed with reinforcements, and the right flank just generally looks like a pain in the arse. Wait, are those? Yeah, they sure are. Same turn reinforcements. Along with Fog of War, this is a mechanic I find indefensible. Advance Wars 2 had them as well with the factories, despite being the antithesis of Advance Wars design. DLATMOL, however, has spent the entire game without them, being an otherwise very well put together experience through and through. These reinforcements also start slow in two ways with generals, what with their 5 move and all, and they all spawn well out of your way. I have more faith in DLATMOL dev to exercise restraint and wherewithal to make same turn reinforcements as tolerable as they can be, which is still intolerable, but again we deal with what we have. Forgot to mention we have a mini Goto, or a second one considering we also had Durga, but she's not a free deploy. Maya has a very interesting colour palette and comes in as a very welcome additional staff bot. Sadly no S-rank anima, so I'm still not going to get any use out of Viuel. Hey, what happened to Nova Caliber? Doesn't matter, an abundance of healers is never a bad thing. Somehow, Weaver returned. Nobody's ever really gone. I'm guessing Maxi just made a fake, or Weaver got better after being beheaded. The same turn reinforcements get more and more dangerous as the map goes on, eventually culminating in Necro Dragons. The kit of these reinforcements isn't strong, it's just their incessant pushing that's a nuisance. Once both buttons are pushed and both chests are looted, you can take on the unenviable task of trying to off Weaver. Not for the first time, but last time it was clear he was going to warp away if you beat him fair and square. Not the case this time, it's endgame after all. Ah, there you go, fake head. See, I'm all for believing in a Foethought Vanquish returning unexpectedly, just go to the tiniest amount of effort. Pay attention, by the way, Wiener has a 2 to 3 range time. A bit of profane blade spam and he goes down, and Orion finally caps strength with the help of an energy rune. We're going to fight a very interesting opponent next chapter. I remember at this point last playthrough I was pretty burnt out on DLATMOL, but being so close to the end I wanted to keep going. I was feeling like past the fake endgame and up to this point was a slog. It didn't help that I was getting my shit pushed in by all the reinforcements in the previous chapter. I also remember this map doing little to assuage my feelings. However, I was excited to fight Voland. But this map has a lot in store for us. First off, it isn't actually seize, it's defeat enemies, so we have to deal with a magic seal. Blink and you'll miss it, but I'm pretty sure the seal is a morph of the tactician's mum. I doubt they have a boss conversation because she's a magic seal and the tactician is entirely magical. The commentary gives us an exceptionally helpful piece of advice, as well as being rather ominous for next chapter. With no reinforcements, we can certainly take our time. For a game that took away the majority of our 1 to 2 range options, it sure does like to throw a lot of 2 to 3 range enemies our way. We advance up the left quicker than the right because Orion is more or less capped out and completely busted. Getting to the magic seal is just an ordeal. You have to dodge siege tomes, fight Florence, and then 2 necrodragons. I finally get a use out of Gaidens as Florence falls. Orion charges 2 necrodragons that had way more might than I was expecting. and Shermie deals with a magic seal which grants way less experience than I was expecting. The right side is pretty troublesome as well, 2 high-speed Kerberai as well as an air caliber mage. The left side is less troublesome with mere generals to deal with. And we regroup up the snake runs to face down the top of the map. Some Reavers and dragon effective weaponry mean I goof one side and bait the other. The siege mages go down easy even without their siege weapons, and then we have an interesting boss fight. Voland has absurdly high defense but very poor resistance for this stage of the game. Along with his animatome, I guess that's where Nova Caliber went, seems like everything is pushing you to fight dear old dad with a tactician. It happened that the Skeletal Woman was pissed off that her hubby could do fuck all to this dude and crit him into oblivion. Works for me. Now, the map as a whole. Interesting, as an endgame map should be. This sort of raised top platform with the lower middle platform surrounded by walls and small areas is executed very well. It's rare to see an almost 4-way party split and rare for it to not be an enormous pain, but we are in the penultimate chapter here. You absolutely have tools to spare, and with the map size actually being rather small, your range support options, mostly physic, can be put to good use, and any emergency one-range staffs that need to be deployed can be done so rather rapidly. The magic seal is also not very restrictive. Such a thing seems like it would be absolute area denial of your magic users, but you can get a physic into the seal range at minimal risk. The snake runs are also unaffected by the range of the seal. I didn't take the time to notice, but I'd guess that the magic seal blocks the top off as well, leaving Voland to cast his magic while you eat shit trying to take out a 40 def throne mage with physical damage and no effective weapons, but no one is going to leave that seal around before they end up fighting the boss. Not a perfect chapter to me, a slight continued over-reliance on 3-range weapons, siege tomes and status staves, but it is endgame. You have to threaten the player in a variety of ways. I only wish there was more player agency, but I wouldn't put that down to the fault of DLATMOL, just FE siege mechanics as a whole. The final battle is here, and it is the hardest final battle you ever will face. You are outnumbered significantly, and there are units mixed in that are more than a match for your units. Your initial assault is going to be pelted by siege tomes, and you've got a slew of cavalry beginning a charge that will hit you turn 2. Something I definitely didn't notice last playthrough or forgot about is the named enemies littered about that are significantly more dangerous than almost any other enemy. A centralised push to engage the bosses as soon as possible is a good bet for a strategy, but as the commentary of last chapter said, it was the only one with no reinforcements. Mercy is in short supply, but it doesn't quite end there. I'd say above the bosses is some slightly wasted space. There's no incentive to push up there once the ballistae are out of uses, and pushing into 2 necrodragons is typically a bad idea. So after some fightin', pushin' and flank securin', you have your choice of 2 bosses to engage first. One with capped speed and 3 range, and the other with enough speed to avoid being doubled by anyone who can damage him. I say the boss with lower strength is less dangerous and can be much more safely engaged. After Fuwa falls, Maximilian will lose his A-rank support buff, allowing you to use your own to gain a slight advantage. Not over him, mind you, because there's no gaining advantage over Maximilian. Safe choices to engage are of course Orion, who probably should have got that last minute Draco shield instead of Dale, and Zahak, who has finally deigned to join us. He's nowhere near as broken as he could be. His tome has been nerfed down to 1 to 2, but with S-rank magics, no staves though, he could theoretically use Vayuel. The crux of this map is twofold. How do you deal with reinforcements and how do you deal with Max? Some reinforcements are exceptionally strong too, and even if you have 2 attackers covered by say 3 healers, you may find yourself stretched very thin even in your defensible position. There's no easy answer here, no simple but effective tactic that will see you through, just rolls of the dice. Good thing too, because boy am I rolling. Here's the second bit of mercy. Max might teleport and shunt someone out of the way, but he won't act after doing so. So Hack would act then teleport. Max can't do that, only for mercy's sake. Let's have a look at him. Now, pretty sure Ashnard has comparable stats, but we don't have Ether or a 40 strength beast to tango with this mad fucker. Yes, level 21, love it, fantastic stuff. If you want to think of it this way, and I do, Fuwa was in a tier 3 class in GBA. Max hit tier 3 when he promoted back when Florence was coming in with reinforcements. Now he's tier 4, and if not for his insistence on fighting us barehanded, he may well have been unstoppable. Back to the fight, and you may notice I've surrounded Max. The Ashnard comparison comes back because guess fucking what, Maximilian moves. Just like last time, the reinforcements that bear down as we fight Metamax are too much. There's only so much ground to give and heals to dispense. This is a fight you'll lose. However, you get some reinforcements of your own. I went through Ahribaal and saved Clovis, so our reinforcements are Nox, an extra physic if I didn't forget to move him, Loban, a powerful sage who is also an extra staff, and Clovis, who I guess has lost his wyvern and is supposed to use the pastrami if you somehow haven't leveled a lance user. Ty might have been too slow to fight Max, but he still got plenty of use out of Patastra. Anyway, last playthrough they were definitely indispensable for extra healing. This playthrough, well... holy shit, he's fucking done it. This single-handedly won the map for me, to such an extent I let Maximilian have a free turn because I wanted to gain footage, and was certain I could pump out enough damage with done bowls to finish him off. Last time it was out of desperation, this time it is done in full confidence. Endgame is done, and quite frankly, I still think it's too difficult. It's mostly in the named units. I understand completely what the intention is, but I feel it contradicts typical Fire Emblem expectation experience. Again, I believe this is the intention. Rarely are you outmatched in Fire Emblem. Rarer still are you outmatched by the foe that you outnumber. Effie is typically the inverse of that. As it has constantly been doing though, DLATMOL has been taking FE7 and elevating it far and away above its thought, potential and limits. What's Metamax doing again? Yeah, that's right. This is brilliant, executed perfectly. I will keep my reservations and my preferences, but I think it's going to be nigh impossible for any ROM hack to top such a sublime package. So let's rewind, all the way back to chapter 20 and the route split. Very little changes in the story, except I guess we get a bit more of an idea on what's happening outside of our little quest. Attila, yes, really, wants to take this auspicious moment to kill Prince Arjun and completely destroy the Empire, or at least make it ripe for the Khotanese' taking. Commentary is a bit bugged, but nonetheless hilarious. The Ahribaal commentary also played here, but only on the first look. ROM hacking is hard. So, because we've come back to this, I said chapter 24 might be the widest map in the game. It certainly has some competition. And actually this map is just fucking massive generally. But this is FE6 Sosei through and through, even someone like me who hasn't played FE6 can tell. Actually, it occurs to me as I get my dudes in formation that this isn't really going on any further than it needs to, so I dump all of my boosters. Let's see Francine with those speed wings. I can also truly throw away any notion of too good to use and hand out brave weapons and silvers like candy. Freedom's fun. Our Doom of Osprey Toku Sentai arrives and immediately does something. Yeah, no shit, the boss isn't going to be directly in front of us as we start the chapter. Huh, she actually kept the damage. My guess is that once she's fully healed, we'll get a surge of enemy reinforcements. For turn 1, however, we get treated to a showing of Port Warren, just spread out a bit. I make a little goof with my bolting. Orion can't hit shit. And at turn 4, the irritation of the enemy siege magic gets forgotten about in the face of an interesting enemy formation. Oftentimes the simplest strategy is the most effective. If you can brute force an enemy out of formation, why not do so? End of turn 4 does give us a surprise. Monsters, they shouldn't be here. I notice our Doom isn't doing very much on this wide open map, he's doing even less than he did in the constricted purple drake of Ahribaal. Advice of investing speed when you enter and being hunky-dory. As I hit turn 6 and some dudes underwhelmingly pop out of some tents, I somehow realise that we are on a turn limit. Whoops, time to hustle. Speed, however, means mistakes. Turn 6 enemy phase is a complete fucking mess, but also is exactly what I imagine FE6 to be like. We have some same turn reinforcements. This definitely knocks DLATMOL down if they're in 2 chapters, not just 1. We have some bullshit RNG and some silly RNG. Hello, yes, if this could fuck off forever in the name of being complete bullshit, that'd be nice. No, I'm not going to say anything nice about same turn reinforcements. That they walk toward you sooner shouldn't matter in the face of maybe they shouldn't spawn at all. I cannot stress enough how indefensible I find same turn reinforcements. This alone ruins the map entirely for me. If I ever replay DLATMOL, I'm not going to Kotan, ever, based only on this factor. At least there's no fog of war, yet. Ahribaal is difficult and unpredictable, but it accomplishes this in numerous ways. This map does not. With same turn reinforcements being an unwanted factor, more proactive movement is forced, but not for the right reasons. I had a mind to wait and bait the last 2 bottom enemies into tie, a reliable and effective strategy. However, if I were to hit end turn, more bastards could have shown up, dragging out the map further. Ahribaal may have been a headache, but Kotan is just aggravating. I didn't think I'd end up cussing out any of the maps except in good nature. This is an exception. Fuck this map. It'd take me some time to figure out what the best map in DLATMOL might be, but I can sure as shit tell you Chapter 20 Kotan is the worst. Let's see what Chapter 21 brings. Let me give you a reenactment of my first reaction to this map. Oh, what the fuck? That really was about it. A sudden and horrid flashback to a skirmish in Engage's shadowy maw came to me. Not a good thing, as that skirmish single-handedly dropped my opinion of Engage down very low. Other maps that come to mind are FE7's Merlinus chapter and the Tiki Awakening chapter. The really terrible thing is putting Ronnie on the outskirts of our deployment area and still not being able to see anything. Initial thought on strategy is limited, but extraneous use of box strats is likely. Hey, here's a question that bears repeating. How does this ballista see my units to shoot them? Don't give me any shit about, oh well, you lit a torch. It would have sniped Kiri regardless. Fog mechanically only works one way, you fuckers. So, ballista through fog. Great, this is why my plan was to move and destroy it as soon as possible. Yes, Ahribaal 21 had a siege mage through fog as well. The difference is that map was easily twice as compact as this one. Another definite negative about fog of war maps is I just can't evaluate them very well. I can't see the enemy formation to judge it or theorise any tactics to move forward with. Doubling down on this is the map's admittedly intentional lack of terrain. I might be missing a joke here, but this really reminds me of the map everyone points to when they say Gaidens maps are shit. Now again, there might be something wrong with me because at least in the remake, that map didn't stick out. Anyway, we kill the ballista and spread out a bit to make sure we can respond appropriately to any threat. Same turn reinforcement through fog. I'm fucking done. DLATMOL shit. Don't fucking play it. Okay, slight exaggeration there. My arse, Ahribaal is the harder or worse route. Look, I can only assume that most players who play ROM hacks have a good amount of experience with Fire Emblem and would rise to the supposed challenge of Ahribaal. From what little I've read, playing Ahribaal and never playing Kotan is common, but I'd be interested to know if anyone played Kotan first, and further if they dropped DLATMOL like a sack of spuds for this sudden and complete bullshit. As I see some enemy bocavs spawn in the bottom right, my tactics pivot slightly. Rather than sticking around to see the same turn reinforcements through fog, after confirming that they merely exist, I begin to regroup and also scope out the map. This is not exactly good tactics, that would be to seize what little advantageous terrain there is, which happens to be guarded by a siege mage, who attempts to zap me with no prior line of sight. Fuckers just flat out cheating. Very cool. Centralising my forces as best as I can before checking the top left, in which I expect to find the boss, if not the top right, I hear a disconcerting amount of same turn reinforcements. Enough so that I thought the game had hanged for a moment. Sheer fucking bewilderment is not something I associate with good map design. We get Ronnie and his rat vision on the job and prepare for whatever comes our way. Right fuck there. So, I can see one enemy flank. I decide to charge it rather than risk getting pincered. If IS could do their fucking job right, this would have succeeded entirely, with maybe one lucky dodge needed, a fair assumption. However, in place of fog actually working, luck completely takes over, and this enemy phase did not result in a reset, not because of terrain or positioning, but pure dumb luck. Am I, or my tactics, to blame for this? In part, yes, I should have committed more to a centralised force rather than slight splintering to keep eyes elsewhere and potentially respond. But you can't justify a berserker coming 6 tiles out of fog with no recourse to adjust. The fact that IS never got it right, that if you can't see the enemy, they can't see you, is appalling, and feel free to count how many times I've said that because it'll never be enough. I responded to the brief flash of a mage formation by placing Ty and his legendary 1-2 range crit abilities with Catastra in a forest, thinking that would be a non-issue. However, it seems like I forgot there was such a large spawn of units and should have figured that there was more to it, and there was. Imagine there is a spider. You don't like spiders, but you can see it, you know it's there. That's Ronnie revealing the formation of armor dudes. You know what would be worse? Knowing there's a spider around, but not knowing where it is. Does that analogy make sense? Anyway, I had a mind to move Yet and Emma away from the top, but honestly they seem like they have it handled. Of course. Everything's cleaned up, but we get a glimpse into our last 3 turns. Sartak is here? After everything, I at least want to see the fucker's stats, if not kill him outright if that's in the cards. It depends on how big his formation is. Let's find out. Or, hey, sneaky shits. A brief pivot to secure my flanks, then we decide if we retreat or push. those are some stats. Not a bad formation either. Not everything went perfectly, but isn't it funny how you can respond and change appropriately when you can see the enemy? And isn't it funny that the enemy should have had to at least put a forward scout into our formation before swinging wildly? I am sure as shit hoping this survive also doubles as a defeat boss like in previous instances, because dudes spawn in all four corners. Tacthack is fucked. While I have seen units survive odds worse than 15 to 1, that involved the 1.5 multiplication of a speed stat from Resolve. Wait a minute, that level up. I forego too much experience gathering, wanting this atrocious shit to be over and done with, and watched Tacthack die like a bitch. More like Shartack. I feel a good deal of relief as Bat shows up and the chapter is cleared. A mercifully sweet outro and we are on our way. I'll be honest, the idea that there would be a 21x for Kotan as well did not occur to me. I'm happy to see it, I guess. Ada gets some character relevancy, and that conspiracy I briefly mentioned previously in Chapter 19 is, I guess, an assassin group instead. Not really much difference there. I'm going to try to piece together the commentary. I don't know what's causing this, otherwise I'd fix it, so we'll make do. I am certain this map is trying to deceive me by looking straight forward. I notice there's a dude on a chest in a sealed room, we'll see how that shakes out. I also can't imagine the game would take away a legendary weapon, however near useless, so the no-dens will no doubt get into our inventory once we beat the map. Or maybe it'll find its way to 23-3 somehow. 6 deployment slots is brutal, the lowest in the game outside of the Prologue, even if that doesn't count because there's no deployment screen on the Prologue. Even Chapter 1 eventually gives you 7 units to play with. Ahribaal 21x gives you 7 slots, which you can argue is like 6 because Orion has to go into the arena. I also don't see Dunvals anywhere, again can't imagine they'd take that away from you, but we'll find out. Huh. You know, something tells me all these weird tiles are fire traps. Okay, this map is horseshit. Well, we steal the Giant's Bow just as planned and move on. This map is real horseshit. Honestly, more tolerable than same turn reinforcements through fog though. Disabled trap? What the hell? Was this always a GBA thing? I've never seen it. Sure, this hacker's done some cool things like porting in FE8 monsters and gas spewer tiles from, I'm guessing, FE6 because I sure don't remember them from FE7. I suppose enemy assassins are almost non-existent in GBA outside of stationary bosses. Well, it's not likely to benefit us. I'm not clairvoyant, but even if I could have opened that chest, I wouldn't have because I bet there's another jack-in-the-box. Yeah, called it. After the door trap, I quickly realised that I should still be listening to Orion and wisened up to this map's nonsense. I stand corrected on disabling trap not benefiting us. One whole tile is now ours to stand on thanks to this schmuck. I mean, all you have to do is wait and Ronnie will work his magic, right? Okay, this had to have been a thing in GBA, it's just that the use case is incredibly small. Jafar is your only assassin in 7, and there's no reason to bring him to Eli Wood's Durandal trial, which actually has what I'll call Canto tiles, and I've never promoted Joshua to assassin in FE8. Marissa who? There's got to be some way into the boss room, but I also wonder what's in that chest. Oops. But at least there's the enemy boss. Will this map fucking quit it already? Oh sure, Ahribaal 20 has loads of tile changes and that upset Tacthack. Well, I'm nobody, but I can tell you this shit's upsetting me. Okay, good, it fully opens up like Ahribaal 20. I have a real problem on my hands. Funnily enough, an enemy with a legendary Brave Bow is a lot harder to deal with when you can't just run into his melee range and smack him. Hiding behind a wall means chancing death, which I'm not keen on doing because, believe it or not, I haven't had to reset this chapter, or the previous Kotan chapters despite their fucking atrocious design decisions, and I'd rather not start. I dealt with all of that garbage as it came, and here I stand, triumphant, I guess. Haha, get fucked nerd, walls work both ways. Ronnie isn't fast enough to steal the boss's book, and I honestly can't imagine how he would manage to be, so I settle for a bombardment war. Given I have 3 range and he doesn't, I win. What an annoying map, but at least it was annoying in a persistent way. Being annoyed by the inexcusable offence of Fog of War and same turn reinforcements combined, this was honestly a nice close to the Kotan chapters. However, we're down 1 Dunballs and up 1 Nodens. I would assume Dunballs can be found sometime in the coming chapters, probably 23-3 in place of Nodens. That could also not be the case, I don't know. Kotan was the easier route, which is a fucking lie by the way, I'll say it again, do not play this fucking route. Easier for less reward, while perhaps the reward for Ahribaal is both the better route and Dunballs. This part of the video is after both endgames, I'm not spoiling anything you haven't seen in this video. You saw how I took down Sahak and Maximilian, with Dunballs, both times. Without it, I'd be fucked. As far as I'm aware, there are now no more maps to cover, save the one exception of non-15X Chapter 16. The only difference from here, aside from the unknown fate of Dunballs, is the final chapter's bonus unit, Bat, not that one. Unless he is exceptionally powerful, capable of damaging Max with Nodens and surviving a hit from him, I can't see him being better than Loban, who brings a much needed physic. I was concerned that I was going to end the video on a sour note given my complete disgust at the state of the Kotan chapters. However, 21X was alright, but at the very least I might go through my team and discuss some standout units, and maybe go through that story stuff with the Sanguine Codex that I promised. So, story stuff. I was going to do unit stuff, but wouldn't you know it, this video was long enough.
The Sanguine Codex is more than just a MacGuffin. It's the central item that the story of DLATMOL revolves around, even if as you play through the game you don't know it. Maxo wants it, gets it, and uses it to surpass the limitations of living flesh. All that is in the Codex is Tacthack's own work, knowledge gained because he chose to surpass his limitations, the capacity for which Brahma saw in all humans and loved them for it. With his knowledge gained on how to manipulate quintessence, he gained immense power, and it was with this power that Tacthack killed Brahma as draconic madness overtook her. So Freesia keeps the Codex so that no one else can repeat what Tacthack did, but why keep it so close to home? I may be reading too much into it and be way off base, but my theory is Tacthack is Freesia's father. The betrayal of Freesia's father killing her mother would have instilled an uncompromising hatred that would last lifetimes. But what about before that? It's possible there were happier times in their family, and the Codex is a bittersweet reminder of those times. Such memories would strengthen Freesia's resolve against Tacthack for what he did. I really don't want to show the miracle that happens as Maximilian's soul brings the heavens down to him in the outro of Endgame, but the conversation that takes place there is primarily what informs my interpretation of the story. Overall, I briefly mentioned it before, but DLATMOL's central theme, if I had to give it one, is potential, and I think that's fantastic. I don't think FE7 is amazing, it's alright, it has a lot of problems, but it had potential. Potential first realised in something like, say, The Last Promise. Potential better realised in Order of the Crimson Arm. Potential perhaps maximised, as it were, in Dark Lord and the Maiden of Light. I hate to chime in after that, I think that was actually a quite nice ending, not to toot my own horn. I try not to script these parts, I just sort of go off the top of the head. But if you watched this whole thing, thank you. I've said thanks in all of my proper videos, and I do mean it. But just bear with me with this, because I'm not going to ask you to subscribe, but I would like to ask you to share this video if you enjoyed it and you think other people will enjoy it. I can't remember if I've said this, I don't do these videos to get loads of views, but I would still like people to view these videos. I'd also like for people to go play DLATMOL and Tacthack. Can't believe this is 4 hours long. I think that's it. Thanks once again.